Hey, 108 edition here on the State of Football. RRC and a place to be. Ric Serritella along with John Murphy here on the State of Football, your new home. Real football talk in the mornings. It's what we do when it comes to the NFL draft, everything football. Oh boy, we've got a jam-packed show once again. It's just me and John counting you down to the new year. Hopefully you're spending some quality family time, not working as hard as us here during the holiday season, but we've got some fun bowl games, not not those cactus bowl, random bowl games. But we actually are diving into the fun portion of the bowl game season. A couple games on the docket yesterday, a couple games on tap for today, and then the second part of the show. We've been teasing you so much about our new website and our new platform, and where our next home for NFL draft content and Devy content too, which I'm really excited about, the Devy fantasy football aspect that we're bringing to the NFL Draft Bible platform. But one thing we're going to be unveiling here during the new year is the all-decade team, which is really a fun, kind of cool exercise for each organization. We'll kind of talk about it. We'll have some stuff up on the website. And, the other great thing we have is like very, very elaborate team needs and kind of draft guides that our guy Jack Despo is doing. So we'll start with the first pick in the draft, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hopefully we have time to talk a little Jets football, which we haven't done too much, even though we're broadcasting live here in the state of New Jersey. We really haven't talked about them too much. But good morning, John. How are you today?
Yeah, doing excellent.
All right, buckle up, everybody. If it's your first time, we appreciate you hopping on board. If you're a regular disciple of the NFL Draft Bible, and we love all our chat room people, Jesse and Robin and DC and everybody involved with the program each and every day. Even if you don't chime in and have a comment, we know you're out there listening in around the universe. Big shout out to our guy Lorenz over in Germany. I know he tunes in each and every day, but we'll be tuning in today. Yesterday, they made us wait till dinner time to get to a bowl game. Today, we have lunchtime football, and we'll get to the two games on the schedule today. But first, some, exciting games yesterday. We'll start off with the Cheez-It Bowl. Oklahoma State, John, going up big early on. Miami coming back and making it a close game. But the big storyline here, the image of D'Eriq King leaving the field, and then you see the tweet last night that he put out, obviously an emotional time for this young man saying, hey, I won't question why, but man, he just seems, to really run into some bad luck here in the final game of his collegiate season. He did say he was already scheduled to come back. Well, now that just seems to make even more sense here for D'Eriq King and the Hurricanes falling to the Oklahoma State Cowboys again, 37-34.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing that I think you saw was the emotional response that club gave when you see him walking off the field. And literally, before he's even halfway to the locker room, they're starting running backs on the field, injured. So he's looking back, hearing the commotion because somebody's calling for one of the guys that's helping walk him off because there's another injury. And I thought it was very telling that, what kind of kid you're dealing with when instead of asking for the cart, he said, no, I'm getting off this field. I'm not taking the cart, and you could just tell, what it meant to him not, to have to be carted off. There. But, I mean, he has had, a past knee injury. So, I mean, that's fearful. Number one, it did not look like it was a contact, injury other than a move he was making, during a play. But I thought the way that, the rest of the team responded at a point in the game where it's, I think, 21-7-ish, when he gets injured, this is not going their way. And they still find a way to come back to make it, a one-score game and lose like that. Not how they want to go out, obviously I thought the other thing was, Mike Gundy for all the hair and, I'm a man, that you think and remember about him. Second half of the game, kind of already predetermined that, if his leading receiver was going to, man up and dress and play in the game, that he then took care of him in the second half. Once they had the lead, they were rotating and playing younger players, didn't kind of, put him out there with a chance to have an injury, but also said the De'Aaron King injury in the first half did not have any result where the kid didn't come to him and say, hey, I'm out. I don't want to have that happen to me. It was already something that was predetermined. So I think that kind of showed you, kind of just, the coach-player relationship there, where he respected the kids wanting this to go out with his team and play in their bowl game, but also know that kid has a real chance to get drafted in the top 100. Yeah, you would have hated to see something happen. But kudos to Oklahoma State. You went out there minus Chubba Hubbard. Forget about whatever season he had. He's still their best running back, on the field, minus 2 or 3 others, and went out and played a good football game against a very good team. And no reason to believe that both of these clubs will not be, top 15, top 20 clubs, when we see the first rankings of next year.
Yeah, I mean, if King is coming back in Miami, I could see them close to the top 10, maybe not in the top 10, but close to the top 10. A lot of it will depend on their departures, because 2 guys with big games, the tight end, Brevin Jordan, a pair of touchdowns there. Bubba Bolden, 9 tackles on the day. I would imagine, both of these guys pegged for the top 64, possibly. I would think they're on to the next level.
Right. I think Bolden's done a very good job. The thing with his position is, look around, and every pretty much every week it seemed like, when guys have declared, we forget. There's been at least 1 and potentially 2, safeties at Syracuse, jump in the draft. Pittsburgh jumped in the draft. Texas, got in there. TCU safety after their bowl game was, called off yesterday, announced it is going to be a very heavy draft in terms of safeties.
But, those first 3 guys you mentioned all have injury questions.
They do. Yep. So I think it's a heavy class, of guys when you then kind of remember or don't remember, some of the names that are in there that, Jevon Holland not playing, this season, you kind of forget. There's a few guys in there that are going to be potentially taken fairly high. And it just makes you wonder, are teams going to not benefit, from this? Because there's going to be some guys that'll start and play. I mean, you see the Redskins are starting a kid in his safety at safety was a 7th round pick.
Jeremy Chin.
Right.
I mean, that Florida State kid could go early day 2, wind up starting like a Chin.
Right. And I think that there's got to be guys at that position late, and even into day 3 that are competing to play early. It'll be I think that's a position that'll be underrated, but, very good depth at the safety position, there. But I think they're in the right place. We mentioned it, the coaching staff there at Miami, they know how to recruit that area. That's very important. They have not a stranglehold, but they have a good hold on Florida, and Miami is becoming a very appealing place to go and be again. I think the big thing down there is, we mentioned it about the difference between Texas and Texas A&M, the investment in the program. University of Miami still needs a little bit of upkeep, with some of their things. When you go down there, they're not, all of it is not exactly looking like,
Right.
What it could be. But they also have some things that they, in terms of some certain things you got to deal with, at different programs, you're going to have to kind of live with no matter what.
You can't have FIU weight room looking nicer than yours, though.
That's true. But I mean, hey, they figured it out back in the day. Go ask Alonzo Highsmith and Michael Irvin and and that crew, how they handled it when they were in a bunch of portables and things like that. So
Jimmy Johnson got it done there, no doubt about it. One last thing here, this Cowboys quarterback, Spencer Sanders. I mean, another outstanding game. At what point do we start kind of, putting him on the NFL radar?
He is a little shorter than ideal, but he definitely has had some games where he's been the spark. He's been kind of the tone setter, for them. They definitely play much better with him. Than when he was out, they struggled offensively to have a good balance. I think at Oklahoma State, even though it is a passing first, like you see the stats, the receivers, and the yardage that comes out of there, for them to take the next step, they need that number one tailback. They need that number one guy that could give them the yin and the yang to that program. They need to find, to me, another real guy, there that's going to be a home run threat. You put a home run threat at running back, in there with what they have. If you're in the transfer portal and you want to go play running back, there's two schools you should look at: Oklahoma State and Nevada. Now you put a home run running back with those three kids out at Nevada, that'll be 50 points a game next year.
Yeah. That'd be a fun offense to watch. The state of football here, Ric Serritella, John Murphy breaking it down. That was the Cheez-It Bowl. Let's move on to the Valero Alamo Bowl, where, this was really never a game, and whereas, like we talked about the Hurricanes coming back, Miami actually had, like 3 dropped touchdown passes, I think, in the first half that I saw. So they really, they were in the game, whereas Colorado seemed like they didn't have a chance, before the first quarter was over. It was like, okay, I see how this game is going to go. And whereas Spencer Sanders, answered the bell, Sam Neuer did not. He gets benched. But really, again, the big storyline here, Sam Ehlinger on the sideline leaves the game in the shoulder sling. And I'll tell you what, I believe he accepted a Senior Bowl invite, had intended to declare for the draft. You wonder what the thought process is now. But I'll tell you what, John, the way this Casey Thompson was slinging the ball around, if I'm Sam Ehlinger, I'm declaring, because I don't want to compete with that kid.
Yeah, I mean, you saw their younger talent, kind of step to the forefront, there. Bijan Robinson, we mentioned it yesterday, but I would not have even been able to expand enough yesterday, to think that kid's coming out and touching the ball 10 times basically for 200 yards.
Was that Reggie Bush out there?
Woof. Just play after play. And on the other side, we mentioned how well the guys that came in, for injuries played, and as bad as Sam Neuer played, when he was in, Breon Lewis actually, was not bad, both arms and, making plays with his arms and his legs, so I thought that was quite interesting. And then you had an interesting scenario of the backup quarterback for Colorado who comes in from Texas and the backup quarterback in Texas who comes in from Oklahoma. So you can see recruiting at its finest, there, with it. But I it's tough for Ehlinger now. It could just be a sprained shoulder is kind of what they said after, the game. He said he wanted to come back in. The medical team, didn't want to okay him to do that. I still think he was a guy that was on the borderline, because accepting it and following through are two different things. And, I think that might have been a point in time where you needed to accept, your invite or potentially, get it passed on to somebody else. Whereas now, if you take your time and you decide to do something else, or because of injury, it's opening the door for somebody else. But it certainly opened the door for you to realize Casey Thompson, is definitely a guy that could compete, to replace him. So the dual question is, how bad of an injury is it? Was Ehlinger already thinking of coming back when he heard that Tom Herman was coming back to the program? And then equally as interesting would be, does Casey Thompson want to stay if that happens, right? Like, you got to put all these things now in perspective, because like we've talked about it, suddenly we're covering, NCAA free agency in the next 3 months, which is something I've never heard of before. Didn't realize it was possible. And I doubt when some people tinkered with something that they were like, transfer portal, should we let the kids play? Yeah, sure. Yeah, let the kids play. Sounds like, like the right thing to do. That's what they said in Bad News, the Bad News Bears. They said, let them play, so yeah, sure. Let them play. Right. Like, I don't think anybody ever looked at it and said, oh, you know what's going to happen if you say let them play? 750 kids are going to try to leave. Come on. This became free agency and college football.
1,000 at this point.
And it's affecting football, right? But it is affecting other sports. Because we talk about it from a football perspective. There's probably other sports that have less players, right? And you could imagine the difference you could make in some of these other sports if you just had 3 or 4 athletes jumping from one club to another, on a 12 or 15 man basketball team or, female or soccer club, or things like that. So it certainly has become a trendy thing to do. And I think that it has also become kind of a trendy recruiting tool to say, if I didn't get them the first time, I might be able to lock back on in the second or third time, and then when you're getting somebody, you're further along as a program. You may look better in year 2 or 3 than you looked, at year 1. If you're looking at it now, if you were recruited in the Big 12 anytime in the last couple of years, and now you have a chance to go to Iowa State, what are you thinking of Iowa State? You're kind of maybe having a little different opinion of what that looks like.
Well, I don't know who else was recruiting this Casey Thompson, but if Sam Ehlinger did return to Texas and Casey Thompson was looking for hey, Mike Leach, Mississippi State, SEC, hey, go throw me in that fire and let me do my thing, because this guy, I think he played just the third quarter, John. He had 170 passing yards and 4 touchdowns in 1 quarter. Then they threw a third string in there, like say, hey, let me find out what I got, what else I got in the itinerary. But I don't know. I think, say what you want about Tom Herman. Is it poor coaching that they're not getting the job done? I know it's not recruiting. The future looks bright if they can put all the pieces together. If that light bulb actually turns on, I don't know. I mean, that is a talented bunch. Bijan Robinson, to me, that's the Heisman Trophy leading candidate for 2021. I think Colorado running back too. They got Jarek Bouchard, who had just under 1,000 yards this season. That's another guy that we'll keep an eye on in the future here on the State of Football and the NFL DraftBible.com. When was Reggie Bush the last Heisman Trophy winner? Did he win the Heisman? He did, right? Yeah. And then they took it away. But did a running back actually win the Heisman since Reggie Bush? I don't remember one. Oh yeah, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry.
Yep.
Mark Ingram, I think, right? Mark Ingram won it. Or no. But what I will say is I'm surprised Devonta Smith, the first wide receiver, I think, since Desmond Howard to win the AP Offensive Player of the Year, or the first one in history, because they've only been giving out that award since '98. So he's the first wide receiver to win the AP Offensive Player of the Year award. And did you see this? I mean, I'm on the air laughing that Devonta Smith even gets the invite to the Heisman. And here he is, John. He's actually the chalk favorite. In Vegas, he's the leading favorite candidate to win the Heisman Trophy. I'm stunned.
I think it may, part of it could be the thing of, we mentioned, I mentioned it the other day when we talked about this. Are you expecting that 2 of the quarterbacks are going to kind of bounce each other out, Trask and Jones? And they're both in the South, right? So you have that vote getter part that gets conflicted. Then you have Trevor Lawrence, who was the favorite all the way until he couldn't play, and then probably gets most of his votes back if you waited till he came back and played.
Did he miss 1 game or 2 games?
So I think he couldn't play Notre Dame, and then did he not get cleared the following week?
He came back the following week. So I think he missed 1 game. I could be wrong.
So in that scenario, I think there's just an opportunity there that the votes in the other parts of the country might go to the guy that's shown up on the highlights every week, all the time, and you just see him crushing, these teams with these ridiculous, arcade numbers. And I think that he may get it over Lawrence by the factor of I think the voting when, basically 3 of your guys are Southeast or South at quarterback. And then say, like, where does the rest of the country vote on that? Trevor Lawrence maintains it, but Devonta Smith might eke out a win over Trevor Lawrence that way. I think we might need that guy that went from doing politics to
Silver. Where's Nate Silver? We didn't need him.
Yeah, we need a map up and state by state.
Well,
I think if
in this scenario, we want to have the Southeast, really.
Yeah, if Devonta Smith carries like Delaware, South Dakota, and Utah, he probably gets the Heisman. Like, we need somebody in here to bring that to the table for us.
I'm so surprised that he's the favorite to win this thing. And I guess because Lawrence doesn't have the gaudy numbers, I suppose. But to me, I mean, that's the best player in college football. To me, Devonta Smith was the second best receiver on his team the first 4 weeks of the season. So Jalen Waddle's just kicking himself like, damn, if I just stayed healthy, maybe I would have had myself a Heisman.
You might have to take a little piece off and give it, if he wins it, he's got to give like, a little something, a little arm,
yeah.
Something. Give Waddle something for helping him out.
Well, was it a leg injury? We'll donate the leg.
I don't know. That'd be too far.
The state of football here, Ric Serritella, John Murphy. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. Your new home for real football talk in the mornings, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Don't forget, January 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're a player, a parent, even a newer agent, or somebody in the industry that wants to learn more about the NFL draft process, we have a great seminar that we've been doing for the past couple years now. And this year we're taking it virtual. It's inside the NFL draft process. It gives you kind of a perspective with industry professionals from all walks of life. We've got agents, we've got trainers, we've got insurance providers, financial advisors, scouts, GMs. You get all that perspective in terms of what to expect for the next 4 months. You can RSVP Sam at allaccessfootball.com. That's Sam at allaccessfootball.com. Again, January 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you RSVP. This thing is filling up. It's filling up fast. It's actually going to be emceed by our good friend Neil Stratton, who joins us tomorrow, at 9:40 a.m. every Thursday. Of course, Dane Vandernat as well tomorrow with the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl watch list and updates. He'll join us as well tomorrow. But, if you want to learn more about the draft process, whether you're declaring for the draft, thinking about declaring for the draft, or even have eligibility left, the NFL draft, inside the NFL draft seminar, it's a free educational seminar. If you want to learn more about it, the Mav Sports Take crew, David Turner and Ryan Roberts, I had a chance to listen to their podcast last night on the live stream. It's up there on the NFL Draft Bible Twitter. But at the top of the show, they kind of went in depth in terms of what to expect from that seminar, some of the people that are speaking. We have at least like half a dozen CEOs that work in the football industry. Our panel probably has, I know we said over 100 years of experience. It's probably closer to 150 years of experience. So to get all that perspective all in one night, I think you should really take advantage of it. Nobody else is providing a platform like this. And really, it's invaluable to have this Q&A opportunity to speak to some of these industry professionals. So, again, Sam at allaccessfootball.com. We will try to talk more about that before the end of the week, but I'm looking forward to our all-decade teams. I'm trying to get that in because, John was busting my chops a little bit about the New York Jets all-decade team. Like they had a lot of talent to choose from or something here. But we'll get into the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll get into the New York Jets. But let's scroll through these bowl games here today. Again, I was starving by the time the football rolled around yesterday, John. 5:30, they made me wait. I had to work up until the kickoff. Today, I might check out half a day here at noon Eastern time down there. And I should have probably drove to this game. Are they putting people in the stands down there in Charlotte, North Carolina? The Duke's Mayo Bowl, Wake Forest versus Wisconsin, a battle of two 500 teams here.
Yeah, and it's the thing of can Wake Forest offense play that well against a little better defense than what they've probably seen on a regular week? Wisconsin still playing tough on that side of the ball. The whole thing with this game is it's only interesting if we can kind of get Graham Metz a little back on track, and feature, them kind of opening it up a little bit. If not, you could probably see a one of the lower scoring, games, in terms of the bowls. I'd love it to see a team like Wake Forest be able to come out here, not only be competitive, but get a win would be huge, I think, for the Wake Forest program, and especially Sam Hartman, where he showed he's going to make those games, even against North Carolina, even against the Clemson. They're at least going to be more competitive than they've been before. And Wake Forest has probably set themselves up. Like, you don't want to be this team, but this version of Wake Forest is a heck of a lot better than what, the alternatives, at times have been. I think they've put themselves solidly in the middle of this conference. They are in an area that's very tough. I mean, in terms of just look at the number of programs that you're recruiting against, and then even look at the second tier programs, App State, Charlotte, the Chanticleers, one loss Chanticleers. Sorry, Big Law. But, when you look at that, I think that, they've done a really nice job, of creating a different, kind of program there. They're on the upswing. The Graham Mertz thing and why that offense just went to heck in a handbag there, after week one. All right, we can blame COVID. We can blame them shutting it down and not being able to practice and things like that. He's thrown 3 touchdowns to 5 interceptions in the other 4 games. So something's not working, and he was at damn near 80% in one game, and now is only a 60% passer for the season. So offensively, they've kind of just not gone anywhere, since, week one. But the good thing in the past couple of weeks, is you've seen Jalen Berger show up, and he's a sign of the future for them. And I mentioned it the other day. I hope he stays, but if he comes out, Jake Ferguson will probably get drafted higher than people think because he's a better athlete.
I think he's the best prospect in this game.
He might draftable. It's probably, I could see, Basham might, if he plays. If he plays, Basham would be, the best guy. But he's right there in the mix, with things. And I think when you look, we met, and one of the guys I forgot yesterday when we were doing our thing is not surprisingly because of athletic ability, but a surprising tight end in the Senior Bowl, the Central, is it Central Michigan? Kid slid into the Senior Bowl.
Well, the Tony Poljan, he transferred.
So is it Western Michigan then? The Morris kid, or is it Bowling Green? It's
Bowling Green.
Yeah, he's a good athlete.
Yeah.
He's a guy kind of like Ferguson that, their athlete quotient at the combine is going to start making some, ears, kind of, peak up because the receiving part of their game is really what brings it to the table. And I know he wasn't drafted, but when you see what Danny Arnold is doing at times in Arizona as a wide college receiver H-back who's now 230 to 240 range, but just vertically attacks the field, there from the tight end and kind of motion almost tight end out to different spots. Those guys are becoming very popular as the Travis Kelces of the world and stuff. People like those bigger bodied kids.
Kyle Granger, he's going to be at the Senior Bowl too. He fits that mold.
Right. So I think he's a kid to keep an eye on, there. But also we want to look at what Mertz is, because first game, he was the number one pick in the draft in 2023 or 2024.
Right.
And I have to say, I really do root for the kid. We were down at the week of the Under Armour game, scouting the AAF at the same time that the Under Armour game was practicing and then playing. And coincidentally ended up in the same place after the Under Armour game. And seeing this kid, his head is on so straight for an 18-year-old kid. I could never have imagined a kid who just went out and was MVP of the Under Armour game and then is out with his family at having dinner afterwards. And he's got family members walking in who are like overwhelmed, right? Like this is the greatest moment of all their lives. And he puts his phone down. He's not on social media. He's not jibber jabbering. Yeah, I'm the MVP, whatever. Thanking each family member, spending time with the kids that were in his family, whether it's brothers or sisters or cousins or whatever. He was so down to earth. And even the people from other families that were coming up to congratulate him, the way that kid handled himself in that element and the factor of getting to see that, you could tell that if this kid ends up having a ton of success at Wisconsin, he's going to be able to deal with what he's dealing with right now because of how grounded a kid, that he was, because he was, like I said, you could not have known that was the MVP of the game and how gracious he was with other people, but how tuned in he was to the importance of that moment to the rest of his family who were there. And instead of being on a phone or instead of being the center of attention, he was allowing everyone else to enjoy, his success, earned a lot of respect knowing that that's who it was.
Sure. Well,
because we're in a literally sports bar. He's up on the screen when they're showing the highlights of the afternoon, and this kid's not looking at it at all. He's paying attention to his cousins and the people around him. Showed me a lot that an 18-year-old kid could have, that kind of wisdom, and that kind of, upbringing to know how to act in that kind of moment.
It means a lot. You can't underestimate that, especially when you look around and you see Dwayne Haskins. You see Josh Rosen, you see Johnny Manziel, but, at the Heisman a couple years back, Dwayne Haskins held court to tell the media how great he was. Johnny Manziel, very braggadocious, right? And so, that especially if this kid gets drafted into a New York, an LA, a Philadelphia, where the media presence is heavy, that sounds like a kid that can handle it. And, it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. Hey, what's a big deal is the state of football here. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, your new home for real football talk in the mornings. Each and every day, we're live 5 days a week. Ric Serritella, John Murphy here. And then don't forget about Saturday, the NFL Draft Tailgate Show with Big Law, who also joins us on Friday for Football Friday. And then he comes back with the hosting duties on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. There's going to be some college football playoff previews there.
There'll be some Yardbird nuggets.
Yeah. Hey, you called it. Liberty pulled out that upset, so there'll be some razzing for sure on Saturday. Maybe David Turner will set the alarm clock this Saturday. Yeah, maybe. But we got one more game here on the docket. I guess the Arkansas and TCU game must have been today because there's a gap from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So I guess TCU, Arkansas was probably for today at 4 o'clock. So then we got to wait, get that power nap in the afternoon and then come back strong at 8 o'clock tonight, where I got to be honest, I cannot predict this game. Number 7 Florida 8-3 versus number 6 Oklahoma 8-2, and the reason why I say that, John, is because is anybody aside from Kyle Trask, is anybody suiting up here for the Gators? Gosh, so my.
Yeah, Dan Mullen was talking a whole lot before that Alabama game. And I know they came back and and finished strong, but boy, this could get ugly. This one might not be, and they're going to point out who's not playing, and who doesn't play. But man, I'm not too sure here. And the one thing it does do, it does give Kyle Trask a chance to be highlighted in a different way, just in the sense of you're not playing with the best tight end in the country, and you're not playing with your primary receiver. This does give Kyle Trask kind of that moment to
receivers with an S, because Kadarius Toney's out, Trevin Grimes is out, 2 Senior Bowl guys. Then they got their third receiver, I believe, is on COVID protocol.
Yeah. Yep. So, you're going to get, Jake Copeland, who has played very well and has had a huge, yards per catch. The big kid Gamble, who's done fairly well, in terms of if you're the other tight end, here's a feature that I guarantee you that there's not many teams in college football would have. And it highlights the positives of the Florida program. Kyle Pitts at tight end, 18 yards a catch. Kemore Gamble at tight end, 16 yards a catch. And Keon Zipper, 15 yards a catch. So if you're a tight end behind Pitts, you're vertically challenging the club. So what it does show you is, number one, they're very in tune of how to get the ball to their tight ends. And that there is a chance here that it's not what I think, which is he could go out there and Copeland can go for 150. They still have 2 tight ends. You have Davis, as a run catch guy in the backfield. I still think this could be a really good football game and highlight Kyle Trask. Because if you could go out and go kind of score for score with Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma has had some difficulties at times, with shutting down, vertical passing games. Now they've gotten better with their pass rush over the course of the, second half of the season. But you have to look at it and say, the one thing that's been missing really from Florida is they don't have a premier running back at the moment, but like the way you've expected to see out of them as a program. And then you look on the other side, and one of our guys that's kind of taken the backfield by storm down the stretch is Ramondre Stevenson, who kind of, made his way through the Oklahoma depth chart. And then once he got on the field,
that's a big boy now.
Once he kind of got through the bouncers, he's in the club, he's throwing people out the club, and you're not taking that kid down with an arm tackle. And to me, that's an avenue for Oklahoma to have, the physical tone of the game. We'll see who really wanted to be here, because Oklahoma would have been that one team, and Ryan, Roberts, probably stick your fingers in your ear. If you wanted a team that might have given.
I was just going to say that. To me, Oklahoma is a better team than Notre Dame.
I don't want to go all the way there. I'm just saying they might right now give Alabama. It'd be an interesting game because of how well that offense is playing.
If Oklahoma played Notre Dame this weekend, Oklahoma's winning that ball game.
I got a feeling. I don't want to have that feeling, but I got a feeling. And now I'm saying in all honesty, it's built off of Notre Dame's defense would slow that down. So it wouldn't be just devoid of competition. I just think Oklahoma against Alabama would resemble what you saw last week against, 2 weeks ago against Florida, where you could get out in front, and then here comes Florida with 2 flurries of a score, and stuff. Like, if you're playing Alabama, you got to be able to score. Right? And that's, to me, the thing of, we'll see what happens with time off. And, even though David Turner is not a fan of that coaching staff, there in the Midwest, you got to take some, you got Ian Book, right? You got to take some of the handcuffs off and just say, like, maybe you didn't want to play it that way against Clemson. But I will still go back and say it's not because of a missed field goal. To me, that game changed because you were the better team the first time and you won the game. The second time you're driving down and they're not stopping you, you can't kick 2 field goals against Clemson and think you were winning that game. to me, you go for it on fourth down, you score, it's 10-0. Now you take Etienne out of the game at 10-0 a little bit, and it might be a little different look, at least early in the game. And if you don't score, you have the best defense in the country at that time, prior to the explosion that happened the rest of the game. And you have them inside the 10-yard line backed up, and you might get field position out of it and still get a second chance to go up 10-0. Yeah, I think you got to be less. You can't play to lose, right? We saw it last week, Miami and Oakland. Vegas. You can't play to lose some of these games when you're kind of behind the eight ball and might have, the other team may be more talented. Sometimes you got to pull some things out of your hat, there. So I won't be surprised if you see some, high activity on the offensive side of the ball tonight from Florida, even with some different names playing for them. But it does give Kyle Trask, a real shot to highlight himself, not only for the Heisman campaign that's already over, but for his NFL campaign, which is kind of varies. You got some people got him third, fourth round, and other people trying to push him as a possible first round quarterback. I think we'll see tonight a lot of that can either be exposed one way, or are we tomorrow saying, you know what, I might need to go back and watch some of his film again.
No, I've seen what I needed to see. To me, he's a day 3 guy that gets pushed up into the second round because of need. And that's how I see it. So you guys watching, you tune in tonight. You tell me what you see tomorrow in the chat room. Big shout out to our chat room peeps. Brian Beasley, good to see you. Robin Backsab, Jesse Frittich, all our chat room people joining us here on the State of Football. You mentioned high activity and Las Vegas in the same sentence, John. I saw yesterday New Jersey set an all-time record, single-month gambling record, a 50-year mark. New Jersey taking in more money in 1 month on sports gambling than any ever. So New Jersey, we keep referencing Vegas with the people out in Vegas things. It's really now controlled by Jersey. I'm just saying. You also mentioned a couple game previews back about the combine when you were referencing the tight ends. I spoke to a very reliable source yesterday. Take this for what it's worth. I spoke to a very reliable source who spoke to Jeff Foster, and he came away convinced the combine's going to happen in Indianapolis. Jeff Foster seemed convinced of it. So, again, take it for what it's worth. If it wasn't a very reliable source, I wouldn't put it out there. And we are here on the State of Football live weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, 5 days a week. John Murphy, Ric Serritella, breaking it down for the people. And something we're doing.
So you're saying that Steak and Shake at 3 a.m, we still have a chance.
Yeah, right.
Still have a shot. Still have a chance to have Steak and Shake at 3 a.m. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Well, actually, let's get on record. Speaking of Vegas, let's get on record. I'm going with Wisconsin, and after listening to you talk, I'm going to go Oklahoma. So Wisconsin and Oklahoma are my 2 picks for today.
Yeah, I'm going for the upset special at lunchtime. I'll take the lunch special. The lunch special.
Wow.
I'll take the lunch special, and then I'll come back in Oklahoma in the evening game.
Okay, so you think Wake Forest, huh?
Well, you know what? I would have taken the upset special in the middle of the day because I would have been cheering my rear end off. Like I said, when you go through what you've gone through as a program, you want to see teams like, for different reasons. You want to see an Arkansas program be better. Because at least I do remember growing up, how good of a team they were when they were playing in the old Southwest Conference. And then you remember the teams, and how competitive they were and how many good players came out of Arkansas, at every position, in the 90s and early 2000s. You want to get them back, to being, a real competitor there. I think it's good for the SEC to have different teams, jump up every once in a while and be competitive. And I think that they would have a bowl win, even finishing 4-7.
Sure.
A bowl win over TCU would have been a huge asset to the Arkansas program. So there's no Arkansas to take. So I'll move my votes over to Wake Forest, and throw some chips in over there. And by the way, if you have won any of that $61.8 million, thanks to my 80% pricking capacity, or you won any off of last week's Liberty upset special, the Draft Bible's expecting a little taste there for their trouble.
That Liberty money line was pretty.
We're expecting a little, something back here. At least a shout out. If you've been making some money off of listening to us all these weeks, it would be nice to, as Coach Parcells said, can we get a little juice? Send a little juice for what we're doing.
The state of football, your new home for real football talk in the morning. Nobody breaking it down like the NFL Draft Bible.
Probably nobody also shaking you down.
Indianapolis at the Combine after midnight with John Murphy. Hold on to your wallets, everybody. You might go down the St. Elmo's back alley, and John will be waiting for you.
Wait. If you got some bucks out of these picks, you better show up. If we show up, you don't get a second chance. So,
well, we're gonna show up right now in a big way because this is something that I've been working on. Even though I've put some time into it, John's gonna shred my picks here for my selections, and we're gonna start with our all-decade team series. We're gonna start off with the number one pick in the NFL draft, who is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not sure if we're going to have time for the Jets here today.
We're gonna make time for that.
Okay, we're gonna make time for it. All right, let's do it. Let's get through.
Even if I had to just say great on the Jaguars, let's keep moving.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Jacksonville Jaguars all-decade team here, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Now, I will put out this disclaimer that players were only eligible to be selected one per franchise. So for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Calais Campbell, Cardinals, Marcel Darius, Bills, Tayshaun Gibson, Browns, they were not eligible for the Jacksonville Jaguars all-decade team. I'll take them by units. We'll go through the offense first. Our coach, our head coach of the all-decade team is none other than the guy that's pretty much been there all decade, Doug Marrone. He did get them there to the AFC Championship. And, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, when I went back and looked, aside from 2018, this team was picking in the top 10 every year of the decade. And even if you go back to 2009 and 2008, between 2008 and 2017, they had 10 years of top 10 picks. Tyson Alualu, Blaine Gabbert, Justin Blackmon, Luke Jokel, Blake Bortles, Dante Fowler, Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Fournette. But, that's a conversation for a whole nother time. Let's take a look at the Jacksonville Jaguars all-decade offense. Kicking off at quarterback, Blake Bortles. Running back, Maurice Jones-Drew. I think he got one or two seasons in at the beginning of the decade to make him eligible for the all-decade team. Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson, DJ Chark coming in at wide receiver. Mercedes Lewis at tight end. On the offensive line, we go Jeremy Parnell, Andrew Norwell, Brad Meester, Brandon Lindor, who played a little bit of center, a little bit of guard, but we wanted to get Meester and Lindor both represented here. Eugene Monroe at the other tackle spot. And then, on special teams, Josh Scobie at kicker, Jordan Todman as the kick returner. Initial thoughts and impressions here on the Jacksonville Jaguars offense.
Yeah, when it's bad when the only person that you might have a argument on is that Gardner Minshew, with 7 career wins, is in the top 5 all-time Jaguars quarterbacks in wins.
Wow.
And probably has the single best season
since Mark Brunell.
Yeah. So when you look at that, could you make a point? But I can't make the point that Gardner Minshew should be on an all-decade team when at the end of the decade, he's giving up snaps to
Jake Luke.
Yeah. and even worse is Glennon. Like come on now. You can't be on that, you can't be on the all-decade team.
It was a tough one to pick here.
Yeah, that was a tough, the Bortles one was kind of probably hard to type. But there's not much, referencing, other, than to say like, hey, there are some good, good players there. What Meester did as a lineman, for that team early in the decade. Eugene Monroe was another good pick, right? That's kind of funny that we're picking these two franchises that are 1 and 2, and two of their best players for the Jets and for the Jags are the center and tackle, Meester and Eugene Monroe, and potentially the center that you would have picked for the Jets and one of the tackles you might have picked for the Jets. Very similar in terms of the strength of the all-decade team for them, obviously carried by Maurice Jones-Drew. They've had good success with receiver, and it seems like it's, moving forward with not only DJ Chalk, but you would expect the next version of this in 5 years, the all half-decade team, if that's something now we, in the future, every 5, halfway through, Chenault and Chalk will probably be on that, team. So, and Mercedes Lewis, I think an underrated, undervalued, guy. You thought he was going to be more of the pass catcher, upper tier, in receiving stats. Instead, turned out to be a guy that's a lot better, in the blocking part of the game and the non-receiving part of the game, than you expect. So not a bad group, but obviously you could tell when your number one position, is Blake Bortles and maybe Gardner Minshew and really nothing in honorable mention. That's why the record of the team in the decade is probably the record of the team in the decade. So let's get over to the defensive side.
Yeah, and they got no coincidence. Guess who's got the number one pick this year?
Still looking.
Let's shift over to the defense, where I thought there was some more, little upgrade in talent. And, we went 4-3 here with Yannick Ngakoue and Jeremy Mincey as the defensive ends. I tried to get my guy Pot Roast, Terrence Knighton, in here because I do think he was on that sack exchange when they went to the AFC Championship. But Tyson Alualu, Malik Jackson, they just did too much for too long for this franchise. So Ngakoue, Alualu, Malik Jackson, Jeremy Mincey up front. Then you come with Miles Jack, Paul Posluszny, and Kelvin Smith at linebacker. Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Boye at corners. Jonathan Cyprien, who was really a good player before injuries. And Josh Evans, the second safety. It was kind of tough to try to pinpoint there. But and then rounding out the special teams, Brian Anger, the punter, Dede Westbrook, who has really made a name for himself as an explosive punt returner here over the last couple seasons. And then Carson Tinker. I mean, there's a guy who did it for a very long time at a very high level.
Yeah, I think the only spot I might kind of say somebody. It's not like they made a gigantic impact, but I could push for Barry Church as the other safety, or at least throw him a vote on Sundays. Probably a good time to go to church.
Yeah, yeah. He probably had the best single season. I think I off the top of my head, I think he only played 2 years with Jacksonville. I think, the majority of his career was with Dallas. But yeah, you could state a case for Church. I think because Church played 2 years and Evans had like 4 or 5. I kind of gave Evans the longevity there, but
longevity, yeah. Yeah, again, like some of their guys that played well on the defensive side of the ball were guys they got from other places, and where you put somebody in the all-decade team. Obviously Campbell, frees up a spot for Mincey, in there, which Christina Phillips and David Cantor will love that pick of Jeremy Mincey, if I'm not mistaken. But there's definitely one or two guys there that Jacksonville, you could have gone a different way if you were, but if you're keeping one player to one team, probably fair. to say that that's where Calais Campbell, ends up. Marcel Darius probably a little bit on the outside, looking in there, as well. So I think that's fair. And I think that Kelvin Smith is also one of the best draft picks. I mean, gone too soon, but had really started to round into a really good playmaker, for them there. So I think that's a guy, who just in terms of when you're looking at guys that were draft picks of theirs to then how well they played, in their time frame. There's definitely some good hits, on there. And then, like I said, when you look at that team as a whole, Josh Evans or Barry Church aside, you would still come back to what we're saying. That's not a bad team if it's got Trevor Lawrence on it, but it's a very different looking team when your combatants for quarterback are, Blake Bortles and, Gardner Minshew. That's, probably really close to being number 32 at the one position you don't want to be number 32 at in the all decade. Is there's not going to be too many teams that their choices for quarterback are those two guys.
Yeah, they're probably 32, and if anybody's going to come close, it's our next team. So let's move on, shall we? Let's take a look at the New York Jets all-decade team. All right, John is revved up for this one. Again, for disclaimer purposes, each player was allowed to be represented for one team. So Brandon Marshall, who played for half the league, even though you might have been the best receiver on the Jets this past decade, I think he had some better seasons with the Bears. There is a defensive lineman who is omitted. I tried to get him on the team. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But let's take a look at the New York Jets all-decade team, starting with their offense. Again, head coach here, Rex Ryan, really the only coach to have any resemblance of success with the back-to-back AFC championships. And that's why, despite what the public voted, the quarterback selection was Mark Sanchez. Now, surprisingly, I put this to the poll for the people, and on the Twitter poll, Ryan Fitzpatrick, overwhelmingly, 50% of the vote came in first, with Mark Sanchez, who gets the nod here, getting 35% of the vote. Sam Darnold getting 15% of the vote. Save your comments. Let me get through the offense. Quarterback Mark Sanchez, running back Bilal Powell, wide receivers Robbie Anderson, Jeremy Curlew, Quincy Enunwa, tight end Dustin Keller, offensive line now DeBrickashaw Ferguson and Kelvin Beachum as the bookends, James Carpenter, who came over from Seattle, Brian Winters, who was drafted at the guards, and then Nick Mangold, who, when we get to the NFL all-decade team, I would imagine Nick Mangold is going to be up for consideration there. But to round out special teams, Nick Folk as kicker, your guy, John, rest in peace, Joe McKnight as kick returner there for the New York Jets all-offense decade team. Go ahead, get the shredder out.
Okay, so, for Rex Ryan's sake, I will jump in with both feet. But here, the Sanchez one, I think the fan element is always going to, if you said it was Sanchez against Bortles, you know what I mean? Like the Jets are just fans are going to vote the way they're going to vote, but he is the most deserving, of them. I think Fitzpatrick, had a season, to me, I mean, he is 13-14. So when you got that many weeks of wins in that short a period of time, that's what the Jet fans are remembering, is that we weren't just sloppy drunk every week. We, could actually walk out of the bar half the time cheering, and not still being in the bar Monday morning crying. So I think the winning percentage, even though it's under 500, it's closer to 500, than the others. So I can understand that. To me, there's a number of guys, I think, at running back. If you're giving Powell the longevity and the how the hell did you get back on the team award, I can understand that. I was kind of torn between Chris Ivory and Sean Green. And I think, at least what we didn't do is put LaDainian Tomlinson on it. So we didn't go the easy route, because you could have gone the easy route and been like, well, is there any chance we could sneak like Brett Favre and LaDainian Tomlinson on this team, and then we really look good? So I think that's that. The other one would be, Eric Decker did not play to the standard of the contract he got. He, had some, because you're taking Brandon Marshall out, but his 2015 stats might be better than the whole rest of this group's career. So he had that one ridiculous season as a Jet with Brandon Marshall, and then, did what Brandon Marshall did, which is move on to another team. We mentioned it, Dustin Keller's chief competitions claim to fame is that he lived next to you, so that's not exactly going to get you on the all-decade team. And how can you have an all-decade team without the most famous Jet of the last decade not on the team? I don't know. How could you do that? You're missing the most famous Jet of the last decade, and you don't even have him on the team.
I thought Butt Fumble was
Brandon Moore. Where's he at? If you're gonna have the butt fumbler, you gotta have the butt pro fumble on the team. So I can't believe you're leaving the most famous Jet of the past decade out of the mix there. And the only other one I would have said is, was Damian Woody not a better player when he played than Beacham?
We got to see how many years Woody came in. So he only played from 2008 to 2010. 2010, he started 13 games. So, yeah, technically, could he be eligible? Sure. But technically he did only play 13 games this decade, So
you're trying to get one guy. I can't get Tomlinson. I can't get Brett Favre.
Well, Sean Green's a good one. Sean Green's a good one because, he did have two, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2011 and 2012, right? So, and he was, he was a 1,000-yard rusher back-to-back seasons, but then he comes back in 2013 with 295 yards, 2014, 392 yards, and then he's out of the league. Who was the other guy?
I was trying to get Chris Ivory on there because at least John Idzik would get one guy.
Oh, man. Well,
amazingly, thank God you weren't trying to find an all-decade GM for some of these teams.
Oh, God. Ivory, he had, Ivory had 3 consecutive seasons, right? He only played 3 years on the Jets. From 2013 to 2015, he started 20 games. He ran for 833, 821, and 1,070, So you could argue that's probably the best 3-year stretch, right? That's probably the best 3-year stretch. Let's look at Bilal Powell now. This is it was tough because I was having this debate. Now, Powell never ran for more than 772 yards, but he had 697 in 2013. He had 722 in 2016. He had 772 in 2017, and he is the only running back that played every year in the decade. Bilal Powell, aside from 2020. He is Mr. New York Jet in terms of this all-decade team because he literally played from 2011 to 2019. He racked up 3,675 yards. So, yes, to your point, Isaiah Crowell, was it Crowell or whoever you're trying to get in, had just as many yards rushing in 3 years than Bilal Powell did in the entire decade. So, it's an interesting conversation. Now, Bilal Powell did add an additional 1,600 yards receiving. Yeah. So, no, it's an interesting debate. It's an interesting conversation, both at the quarterback and the running back positions. But again, to me, Sanchez getting to the AFC championships, even though the defense is what carried them there, he was still 33-29 as a starter for the Jets.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like the other parts would be, they weren't what you expected when you got them in free agency. So did Jeremy Kurtlew outperform, and does that get him on there over a Decker or Santonio Holmes?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Kurtlew, it was more like he did do a lot of special team stuff, right? Robbie Anderson, I think it's the best player they drafted at the position, and Quincy Enunwa was probably the second best, but Enunwa and Decker, I think if you were to put Decker on this team, Enunwa was probably the guy you would probably take off, right? Because
yeah, and that's what I said. I think with Decker and Holmes, they're not looked at as favorably because of what you thought you were getting, and then you didn't always get it. And Holmes is really kind of just some big play moments in the regular season and postseason that, and for you to mention the word Jets and postseason in the same breath, and you're remembered for doing something positive.
Yeah,
that's like
that. With that being said, you could probably state a case for Braylon Edwards had some. Right. But Santonio Holmes, it's an interesting case because I think I might, looking at it now, might give him the nod because of the clutch plays. He came to the Jets in 2010, 746 for 6 touchdowns his first season, 654 for 8 touchdowns his second season. And I think those were the years they went to the AFC Championship. Then he just fell off the grid, 272 yards and 456 yards. The only 2 touchdowns his last 2 seasons. But you could say his 2 seasons were kind of a big deal. Eric Decker, now he came off back-to-back seasons. With Denver, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. In 2012 with Denver, 1,064, 13 touchdowns. 2013 with Denver, 1,288, 11 touchdowns. Then he comes to the Jets and still manages 962 yards for 5 touchdowns in 2014. And then in 2015, he gains 1,000 yards again with 12 touchdowns. I guess those are the Ryan Fitzpatrick years. But, yeah, you look at it. Now, if you want to just take 2 seasons, right, that's probably the best 2 seasons. that those 2 seasons are probably better than any of these guys. Now, Robbie Anderson, though, he dropped a lot of balls. He really did. I'd love to know how many balls he dropped, but he also caught a lot. 587, 941, 752, 779. So I think the fact that he was homegrown probably came into factor here. You could say the skill positions with the Jets, flip a coin. I mean, really. Yeah. you could get rid of all 3 of those receivers and put Decker, Holmes, and Marshall, right? Or you could have Anderson, Kurtlew, Enunwa. Bilal Powell, is more of a longevity selection. If you go,
and you know what you are seeing when you do these. First off, it's fun to have all the conversation, but here we are at the end of the decade, and where are these first 2 teams that we're talking about?
1 and 2.
1 and 2, and now you look and you say, quarterback. The Jets have a guy that's better. But you have 2 choices. What happens if you say that in the NFL? If I have 2 quarterbacks, what do I have? Right. Not a number 1. I have 3 choices at running back. Okay, none of them are Maurice Jones-Drew.
Right.
I don't have a for sure wide receiver that just stands out to say, I probably have a bunch of number 2s and 3s, because even the seasons that Decker and Santonio Holmes had, other than that one season that Marshall had, are really number 2 and 3 receivers. So in the all decade of your offense, when Dustin Keller is your best position player in terms of he won that all decade spot at tight end, pretty much hands down. Okay, Chris Herndon, you're on on the radar. But that's not exactly going to get you where you want to be. That's going to get you a lot of fluctuation, to say there's some parts, in that time frame that with Ryan Fitzpatrick, we look like we got a shot. And now we're sitting there at the end of the decade where Ryan Fitzpatrick might still be the best quarterback if you still had him. If he came back next year, he'd be better than the alternatives that you had, and he would have played almost a decade earlier. Now we know why we're sitting there at 1-2.
Yeah.
Because when we get to teams 25 or so down, if you're talking about, let's see, Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Marquise Colston, like when you start featuring in your mind who's the all-decade team for some of these other teams, man, it would be worse on the field if you were playing all-decade teams against each other. The line for the Jets going against some of these teams that'll be 25-32, the Jets would be 10-point underdogs with their all-decade team.
Well, they might be able to keep it close with Rex and this defense. Let's take a look at the New York Jets all-decade defense team. New York Jets all-decade defense team here. And, starting up front, it was tough. I just couldn't find a way, and they played 3-4 majority of the decade. I couldn't find a way to get Leonard Williams on this team. He was a underrated guy. They ran him out of town, but the production was there. However, you look at Muhammad Wilkerson, Snacks Harrison, Sheldon Richardson. Whew, that is a loaded up front defensive line. Leonard Williams not too far behind there. You could argue a case. I guess Sheldon Richardson maybe, but Snacks and Mo Wilkerson, man, those were staples for the Jets. Darren Lee, Bart Scott, David Harris, Demario Davis at linebacker, Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie at corners. And then the end of the decade here, Jamal Adams, who's already gone, and Marcus May, who's talking like he's going to be gone at the safety positions. And then special teams, Lack Edwards, who did it for most of the decade, Andre Roberts from the Citadel. He bounced around, but had some pretty productive years there with the Jets returning punts, and then Tanner Purdom as the long snapper.
Yeah, so to me, I understand the Williams one, and I guess depending on which way you go, with it, he's in or not, depending on how you play it. I would say even though the first couple of years of his career were on this side of the decade, but he played at least 5 or 6 years on the other side of the decade, I think Calvin Pace is there somewhere in just totality of what he did, especially with bouncing back and having a double-digit sack season, at what was kind of the twilight of I think he had 10 sacks somewhere in 13, 14, 15 range, there with them, but 60 career sacks. I think he's top 5 all time in tackles for loss, for them as well. I'd have him somewhere in the mix. You could kind of pick and choose who you would sacrifice, for that. Might be Deron Lee, in terms of, length of career, type thing. But I think, secondary is pretty much locked down, no pun intended. And, I think the other spots, again, you're right. It's probably Leonard Williams and probably Richardson, would be the conversation, piece there, for it, but yeah, I mean, that's a solid defense. Revis and Cromartie on the outside and Jamal Adams at safety, and Marcus May steadily has, become a solid performer as well. You got plenty of, Demario Davis and Bart Scott in terms of leadership and, the kind of seasons that they had, there, and you're definitely getting more than enough push up front from that group, so defensively, again, it does show you like what did they have and why and where were they successful, and then it definitely shows you where the troublesome spots were, for that team in the past decade, and moving forward, it shows them what they need to clean up, because here we are again with, you're at the end of the decade. And like I said, if you were moving forward for the next 5 years, is there a clear-cut running back? Do the Jets have a clear-cut running back who's going to be on, the next, decade? No. The quarterback? No.
No, they got the all 2-decade running back on the roster.
Right. After last week, Berrios is currently leading the pack for all-decade receiver moving forward. So
check out this is the interesting conversation though. The Sheldon Richardson, Leonard Williams thing is so close, but here's what put me over the edge. Just the amount of pressure that Sheldon Richardson was able to create. Like, look at these numbers. The sacks aren't that impressive, right? He played 4 years with the Jets, 3.5, 8, 5, 1.5, right? Sacks aren't that impressive. But then you look at tackles for loss and QB hits. 2013, 3.5 sacks, but 12 tackles for loss, 8 QB hits. Pretty good for an interior guy, right? 2014, 8 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 21 QB hits. The next year, 5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 15 QB hits from the interior. That's impressive. And then, 2016, he only has 1.5 sack, but again, 13 tackles for loss, 9 QB hits. So here's a guy, even though it didn't show up, with the sack totals, he was constantly getting behind the line of scrimmage, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, and hitting the quarterback. Now, Leonard Williams, whose sack numbers are pretty good, 3, 7, 2, and 5. He also played 4 years with the Jets. Wow. Look at his QB hits. See, here we go. We're working through the situation. Tackles for loss, he goes 7, 11, 3, 11. Now, I didn't realize this. QB hits. 2015, 21. 2016, 19. 2017, 25. And then 2018, 20 QB hits. So, you know what? We may have to rethink this because I didn't realize, again, it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But, man, when you look at QB hits and tackles for loss, maybe, just maybe, Leonard Williams does get the nod over Sheldon Richardson. Just to put it in perspective, I'm going to look up Aaron Donald. I want to see how many QB hits this guy gets. I'm just curious to put it in perspective. So, Aaron Donald, QB hits. If you look back, this year he had 26, last year 24, 2018 41, 2017 27, 2016 31, 2015 37. So, he's just in a whole league of his own.
Yeah, but if you're within 60 to 75% of a guy who's putting up Hall of Fame numbers,
yeah,
you're not out of the ballpark.
Yeah. And you got to say now, looking back at it, that trade actually turned out to be a good one for David Gettleman and the Giants, right? So, all right. Well, there you have it. Just for perspective, Leonard Williams tying a career high with the Giants this year, 25 QB hits, 11 tackles for loss, which is also a career high, and 8.5 sacks, another career high.
You know what else is going to be a career high next year? His average on his contract is going to be at a career high.
Right. You gave up the equity, now you got to pay the piper.
Yeah.
But no, that's going to be a fun exercise that we continue to kind of do here on the State of Football when we have some, days like this where, no guests booked. We had some fun with the all-decade team. I've got the Bengals on deck picking third. And again, we're going to release this on the NFLDraftBible.com once we hit our new platform, which we'll be announcing shortly. We went a little OT with you, but we had fun doing it, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow, Thursday, New Year's Eve. It seems like these guys join us at Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, it seems like every Thursday that Dane Vandernat and Neil Stratton fall on a holiday. So we'll be back on New Year's Eve tomorrow for our last episode. That will be episode 109 tomorrow. Episode 109 tomorrow. And big shout out. I saw Big Law in the chat room there, munching on some nuggets. Yardbird nuggets. We'll have him Friday for a Football Friday edition. It's time for parting shots here on the Wednesday edition. What do you got for us, Johnny?
Well, you did mention one guy that was on an all-decade team that unfortunately is not with us any longer. And something I want to mention to folks because it's very, very important. If or when you see it, circle back around. So our legal system has such in the past 2 or 3 years corrected itself in a number of states, in which case it is, with a crime that is punishable with a long-term sentence. You can no longer in the state of Louisiana have that be officially on record if the jury voted anything other than 12-0. So in the case with Joe McKnight, the vote was overwhelming 9-3, but because it is not a 12-0, the new law that has taken effect has allowed a number of cases to be reopened and likely at some point retried. One of which was Willie Smith's case, in which he was killed in an incident downtown. The other one is the case with Joe McKnight, which has been listed as road rage for a number of different places and a number of different conversations and topics. What I want to leave you with is, even though we're only 48 hours from a new year, one of the lasting images of 2020 will be all the racial issues that we've seen spark up again. I want to ask you all to spend the same time, or even a half of the time or a quarter of the time you do paying attention to what we talk about football. Go back and read any of the articles. Go back and read any of the transcripts. Go back and read any of the information you need on Ronald Gassard, who has been convicted of killing Joe McKnight, and it is not a road rage incident. It is 100% a racially motivated crime. That's what it should have been dealt with at the beginning. I understand the legal system, and if you can get what you can get, that's normally what you're going to try to go after. But when this case comes back up, do not allow it to be that someone is saying, I did not get my day in court because they voted at 9-3. Remember that somebody got killed because 2 cars couldn't agree on how they were negotiating an exit ramp, and someone decided to pull up next to somebody, get out and create an argument, and when they saw a person of color get out of the car, decided that instead of getting back into their vehicle where you would be safe, that they had to pull out a gun and shoot several times an unarmed person. Now, you can tell me that that's road rage, but now go back and do the research of the person and how many times they had gotten into similar incidents with minorities and people of color. And don't come back to me talking about road rage. Because Joe's family doesn't come back from that scenario. His son doesn't get his father back. And Ronald Gassard, I am not letting you off the hook with telling people it was road rage. The road rage was the rage that you were driving with on that road for anybody that did not resemble you, did not look like you, or was not somebody that you thought deserved the same credibility and legal or even just humanity for somebody that may have cut you off, or you may have cut him off, or whatever you two didn't do correctly to negotiate how to get off the highway. So I'm letting you know, you're not off the hook. And we may have put Joe McKnight on the all-decade team, and maybe that's why. Thank you to Rick, for putting him on there, justly deserved, to give us the moment to talk about that serious, a topic that serious, which is, when this comes up, do not allow somebody to turn this into something different than what it was, because it is ugly. And it did happen 4 years ago And that's before we saw all the ugliness of racial insensitivity and worse in 2020. Go back and read it for yourselves. And I'm saying if you're white, black, or anything indifferent, go back and read the court case. Go back and read the court files. Go back and read, what this person had done in their life, and come back to me and tell me that you believe it was only road rage. I'm okay with it. But if you come back and you see it the way that you should see it, don't allow a 9-3 guilty vote to now be whitewashed, no pun intended, into being anything other than it was, which was 100% a hate crime.
The State of Football, your new home for real football talk in the mornings, telling it like it is here on December 30th, 2020. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.